I work as a researcher at the MIT Media Lab in Boston. Just for a little bit of context, the Media Lab is one of MIT's main innovation experimental spaces, and it does a whole range of different things. It's the place that came up with Google Map technology and touchscreen technology about 20 years ago. It's also the place that works on fashion and social media. So I work within a group at the lab called the Center for Civic Media, and a lot of our focus is different civic engagement projects around the world. Right now, we're in the process of setting up a MIT-backed production house in Mumbai, where the focus will be creating entertainment content on themes of civic and political change. And I'll explain a little bit more about that and the motivation behind it. Traditionally, we've worked on a lot of civic technology, so things like developing apps or survey tools to allow for citizen engagement. But over time, and especially as we move the focus to India, we have realized that before you can offer the tools, you need to create a motivation for civic engagement. There's a dearth of kind of a sense of duties that one has in a democracy. There's two key obstacles we see in creating that motivation. The first is a complete lack of trust in government and political institutions. This sense of frustrations that sab log mile hue hai, or that everybody's corrupt. And the second is a lack of knowledge about political institutions. So even if you feel like, okay, I'm bothered by this problem and you want to do something about it, it's usually followed by this question of, but what can I do, especially as one person. A lot of our dinner table discussions or water cooler conversations will end with a statement, something like the government should provide access to free healthcare or free medicines. It'll almost never be about what you and I can do to pressure the government or push the government to provide that healthcare. And that's really what civics is. So how do we go about addressing these two problem statements, right? And I think that's where we see the role of entertainment in the intersection of civic education. The power of a good story or a fiction to bring an issue to your attention that you might not traditionally care about. How parliament functions, how the judiciary functions. What is the difference in your councillor, MLA, and MP? Modi's name might be everywhere, but fortunately, unfortunately, he's not responsible for everything. So where do we direct that frustration? Bringing out kind of complex solutions that have been implemented in the past and putting that on screen so we can learn from the strategy. The other power of fiction, of course, is the representation of minorities. And this has been proved with several studies that in a stratified country like ours, in a society like ours, we might not interact with communities from different classes, castes, ethnic and religious minorities as much. But when you're exposed to them on screen, it is proven that your prejudice reduces and your ability to empathize increases. The other massive power of fiction that we see is what we call civic imagination. Often you're so cynical and jaded by the complexity of the problem around you, you don't think anything can change. But if an on-screen representation is able to romanticize the idea of a better, let's say a better Bombay even, for us, we might be a little bit more motivated to act towards that image that we've seen. So this is really the kind of content that we want to create. We want to take it a step further to not just make entertainment with a social message, but to include a lot of the fabulous edutainment research that has happened over the years. So right now, a lot of our research at MIT is focused on looking at some of the evidence-backed edutainment techniques that people like Albert Bandura or Miguel Sabido have worked on, having like 3 types of characters, a positive, negative, transitional, having a long story arc where you show the consequences of a character's action or inaction. We also kind of focus a lot on formative research. So if we're taking a topic like gender, we have developed this open source news analysis platform where we crunch millions of articles on a daily basis from around the world, and you can really query that database to look at how that topic is represented. So when we looked at gender, and this is some work we did for the Gates Foundation, we looked at how gender issues in India were being spoken about post-2012, post the Delhi gang rape. We found that yes, there was a huge rise in conversation on women's issues, but the framing, the language used to talk about it was primarily from the lens of a crime. It allowed you to put your blame on that unsafe public space or that nameless, faceless person in the back alley who you might be afraid of. It made no connection to patriarchal norms, no connection to preference of sons over daughters, no connection to unequal wages for male and female employees. So kind of that is a gap that kind of research allowed us to identify, that we saw we need to build that into the content. And then of course for impact studies, doing things like randomized control trials, where JPAL, which is a research center at MIT, that's really where RCTs came about, it's the home of RCTs. Doing content analysis of scripts, so to see the gender and minority representation in that, again, through an automated way. Some traditional qualitative techniques. So that's a little bit about the kind of content we're trying to create and the method we're trying to use. Yeah, I guess our goal is really make civics sexy again. I don't know how Trump's going to feel about that statement, but that's really what the aim of this endeavor is.